Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that is passing wisdom to the next generation of youth sports parents and coaches. And I'm your host, Coach Furtado. In our episode today, I interview Dan Decker. Dan is a seasonal summer and fall camp director for PGC basketball. He has also been a college coach, a college athlete, and a high school coach, winning a state championship in New York. In our conversation today, we talk about the intentionality and effort it takes to become a great athlete, a great coach, and we also discuss different ideas around how we can improve our health, fitness, and nutrition. So without further ado, you know what to do. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. Dan, I'm thrilled that we are reconnecting after connecting few weekends ago in Anaheim at PGC Shooting College. I ended up learning a ton as a coach, even though I was there as a basket instructor, and passing on that wisdom to the kids that were there and the athletes that were there. So it was really nice to meet you, and I'm glad to have you on the Bridging Impact Podcast now.
Yeah, Coach Furtado, I really appreciate you thinking of me and appreciate you thinking to have me on. I'm really excited to share and talk with you a little bit.
Of course. So the first question we always ask every single guest is, what's your definition of impactful leadership?
Yeah, and I listened to a couple of your episodes leading up to us sharing today, and I was just kind of thinking through on my own. I think for me, impactful leadership is really just taking the different experiences and the different things that we've been taught and paying it forward to the people that we now have an opportunity to teach and to coach. And really just paying forward and trying to help them just a little bit further along on their journey. And whether or not they take it, that's up to them in their basketball career or, wherever they're going in life. But, the best thing and the only thing that we can really do is just make sure we try to leave a positive impact by paying for what was given to us.
Yeah, I love that. Sharing the impact, bridging the impact in those experiences that we have in life. And I feel like that's a lot of reasons why a lot of us coach, and there's plenty of reasons. So I'd love for you to have the opportunity to share about your different experiences as a player and now as a coach, and with PGC and also with the youth basketball organizations, college basketball, all your experiences.
Yeah, so I currently am really fortunate where I still get to work in basketball. Definitely something that I enjoy doing. And basketball is really something that I put and invested a lot of time in for myself. It was not the sport that I was the best at. And I can remember actually thinking back to 8th grade when I was kind of at a point in my sports career where it was time to start being a little bit more serious about one sport. Not that I didn't play multiple sports, and not that I don't think players, I think players should play multiple sports and the benefits in that. But I've been playing a lot of travel baseball, and as much as I loved baseball growing up. When the field transitioned from the little league size to the 60-90, got a little bit bigger, got a little bit slower, and I just kind of lost some interest in it. And so I had shared with some friends that, I was going to stop playing in travel baseball and focus more on basketball and, work to try on an AAU team. And I can remember one of my friends kind of looking at me a little strange. And he's like, well, you're not very good at basketball. And so, the way I thought about it was, I'm not very good at basketball yet, but that was my passion. That's what I felt like I could, eventually work my way up to and be better at. And so, hey, maybe I could have been better at something else, but I'm really glad in the investment that I made in basketball. And so I was never the tallest player, never the most athletic player. I know your audience can't see me, but I'm a 5'10", I was a 5'10" guard in high school. And then even when I got to play in college. And so being a 5'10" guard, I had to be the most skilled player on the court most nights if I wanted to be able to hang with the other players that I was going against. And just some of the players in the conference growing up that I played against, we had guys like Carl Towns were in our conference. I played against guys in even club basketball like Kyle Anderson, who is now on the Timberwolves with Carl Towns and was formerly on the Memphis Grizzlies. And so, I had to make sure that I was a skilled player because my height and my athleticism was not going to make the cut. And so I invested a lot of time in the off season into my own game. I was fortunate enough to be a 1,000-point scorer at the high school level, played under a great high school coach who's no longer in coaching, but definitely does a lot to impact the youth and making sure that sports is still a big aspect of what he pushes in the school that he works for now. And then I was fortunate enough to play at the college level. I went to a small Division III school, Clarkston University, where I was able to start as a freshman and be a 1,000-point scorer there as well, which again, just even in college, spent a lot of time in the summer just working on my game and really honing my own skills. And, I shared a little bit about impactful leadership, and really, the way I look to be an impactful leader is paying forward what I did as a player in my own training, but also things that I wish I would have done a little bit differently back in my career that maybe can help jumpstart another player's career, or just get them and help them reach their maximum potential. And then since playing in college, kind of done a wide range of different things, but I currently work seasonally with PGC Basketball, where I direct their basketball camps in the summer and then direct their clinics in the fall. I do about 8 in the summer, about 8 in the fall. So eight full weeks and then 8 weekends here in the fall. Just kind of actually just finished my fourth one, so halfway through for the fall. So I've been working with them ever since 2015. I've coached at the high school level. Was fortunate enough to be with a team that won a state championship in my first year as an athletic director and assistant coach under the head coach at a private school in upstate New York. And then after that, I was able to coach at the college level at an NAI school, Madonna University, out in just outside Detroit, Michigan, and worked under a great coach there as well and learned a lot. And kind of just transitioned to make a change. Currently living in San Diego and working in youth basketball, working with a club basketball organization, just kind of working to jumpstart their club out here in San Diego. And so, really fortunate to be, working in basketball, work with PGC and a couple of different companies in the game of basketball. So, now just in a similar way to what you brought me on for, is just looking to be an impactful leader to players of the next generation.
Yeah, 100%. So it's really interesting how you talk about that choice that you made, because I actually played baseball too. I was better at baseball than I was at basketball. And we have different but similar stories, because I played baseball through high school, but I think I put way more effort into basketball, even though I just naturally was better at baseball, but I put way more effort into basketball, which is still where I am today. And I'm very grateful to be in the basketball space, talk to basketball coaches, meet basketball coaches from all around the U.S. And I bring that back to the point of when your decision was, when you make that jump from 60 to 90 feet. And I feel really bad for the parents that have to watch that kind of baseball, because most kids can't throw strikes. We're jumping from the 60 to 90 feet. I swear the games bump up an hour or 2 hours. And where I'm from, it's cold, and in April and May, and it's windy. So with that being said, you made a decision that said, I'm not good at basketball. And then you said the keyword yet. And you have put in countless hours and work ethic in terms of, to play college basketball. And now it has taken you to a point where it's your career. Can you talk about that important word that I feel like the 3-letter word that a lot of people don't talk about is yet?
Yeah, I think that was something that was impactful for me. And I don't think I fully understood it at that age. But as I've gotten older, and I think PGC basketball, it has been huge in that. I was actually just listening to a quick Instagram clip this afternoon, and our president and owner of PGC Basketball, Manu Watsa, was talking about the power of the word yet and using that with coaches. And I was maybe a little bit harsh on myself. I wasn't necessarily a bad basketball player. I'd still made one of the better AAU teams going in my 8th grade year, and I was fortunate enough to also be able to make the varsity team as a freshman. But in comparison, I was 5'10", or just under. I was about 5'8" when I was in 7th grade. So I was an early bloomer. And so when I was in 8th grade, I was still transitioning from being a forward to how to play as a guard, as a shooting guard, as a point guard. And so, it was just something that I was working through. And I knew that, and I had aspirations even at that age. And my aspirations were a little bit higher than where I ended up playing. But I had aspirations to play at the college level. And I knew, I'm like, hey, I might not be very tall. My dad's not very tall. Maybe I'll be as tall as my brother, who was just under 6 foot. But I knew, I was like, man, I got to develop guard skills. And so to be honest with you, I'm not even sure I fully understood the yet aspect of it, but I knew. And just from listening to people talk, I remember I was playing open gym as a 7th grader listening to one of the older guys who was a sophomore in high school. And I was fortunate that they let me play in that, because I was definitely the worst one as a seventh grader. I just remember hearing a guy talking about how he would spend, and he was one of the better players. And he just said, yeah, I've just been spending 2 hours a day working on my game. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe if I spend 2 hours working on my game, that maybe I could be that good eventually one day as well. And so that was kind of just how I saw the word yet. And that's been huge, I think, for me even now in whatever it is that I do. There's things that I do now that I'm still not very good at. And it's just kind of changing the mindset. And even though I'm not good, it's all right, how can I figure it out so that I can be successful at whatever it is that I do? Because I do believe that in most things, not everything, but in most things, it's within our ability to be able to work on and increase our ability. And I think part of what has given me that confidence now, even outside of the game of basketball, is because I was able to do that with my basketball career. I wasn't someone who probably should have played at the college level because of my height and not being the most athletic player, but because I invested a lot of time and worked at it. The word yet really impacted my basketball career, and I think that has impacted the way that I view even just whatever it is I do in life.
Right. I think it's a really powerful word, because I'm thinking about it, and as you're sharing, like it applies to basketball and to life. Like I think about when I started podcasting, I was a terrible interviewer. Like I was just super mumbly, and I asked 3 questions in one time because, I'm trying to be smart, and I like trying to, sound good. And so I'm just figuring it all out. But now I'm continuing to, hone my craft as, an interviewer. And so it applies to some of the lessons that we learn in sports. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot since I went to the shooting college in PGC is you talked about the 2 hours that, that sophomore was putting into his time and every day. And I think, there are some people that do put in that time. But I think what really PGC helped me when I was an athlete and now reminded me when I came back as a coach is how to use those 2 hours, how to use 1 hour. And so could you talk a little bit more about intentionally crafting our training sessions and times to be the most effective and maximize our time?
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. When I went to BGC as an athlete and then as an instructor, that was definitely something that I felt was super impactful. Was it's not what you do that makes a difference, but how you do it that makes the difference. And so an example that I actually use in the summertime for athletes that I work with, one of the very first activities we do is a ball handling activity. And I have them just kind of go through it, and I tell them what they're going to do, and they go through. And I usually get some strange looks. We have observing coaches that come in, and even maybe from instructors, but I try to frame it a little bit ahead of time for them. But I have them go through it, and the coaches, I even had a coach tell me after, and they were like, yeah, I was a little confused about, what you were doing. I heard about PGC, but nothing really looked special. So I have them go through it. And then after doing it, we talk about comfort zone and how your comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing grows there. And so, yeah, there's definitely time and a place to spend in your comfort zone, but just understand, if you're going to be in your comfort zone, it's not going to get any better. Nothing positive is going to happen. It's just kind of a wash, or even sometimes maybe a little bit down, depending on how much time you're spending in your comfort zone. But they go through the ball handling activity, and what we find majority of the time, and again, I don't think it's their fault. I think sometimes in our mind we put the blame on the athlete, but it's just they've not been taught how to do it right. They kind of know the what, and so they go through, and it's a lot of them when they're doing the ball handling activity, just kind of going half speed. No one ever makes a mistake. They're just kind of going through the motions. We talk about how, hey, if you want to go and do that, or for myself, I then grab a basketball and I go through one of the activities and I start doing a V dribble in front. I'm like, hey, I could do this in front of my body all day without making a mistake. But if all I ever did was train at this speed, I'm not going to get any better. And so then I go and I get in a really good athletic stance. I get my eyes up and I really start to pound the basketball down. And I explain it to them hey, I don't expect you guys to dribble a basketball like this. But if you dribble basketball like this, it is going to increase your strength and your handle and your control over the basketball. And so I go through and I make, 5 mistakes, maybe over exaggerated just a little bit to get the point across. But then that shows them and they see it and they're like, okay, that makes a little bit of sense, or hopefully for a lot of them, it makes some sense. And they go through and then I have them do it a second time all the way through. And it's completely different once they understand that it's not what it is that you're doing. And I kind of explain, I didn't have an opportunity to watch Kyrie Irving work out at any point. My brother did play against Kyrie Irving growing up in high school, and I got to watch that game. But I did have a friend who is about 10 years older than me, and they got to watch Kyrie Irving train. And that's what he would say is it's not that Kyrie Irving is one of the best ball handlers of all time because he has any special or magic drills that he does that he doesn't share with anyone. He just did it at a different level, at such a higher level, an uncomfortable level, and that's where he got to where he's at. And sure, there is some natural ability there, but he wouldn't have been able to hone that natural ability if he didn't work at the level he did.
100%. So I remember when I went, it was like, I don't know if we talk about it in the summers because I haven't been in the summer in a while, but did like a 30-day challenge. And so like I would go home and like there was like this certain ball handling routine and I still teach it to this day. And I would just go home and I just rip through it, and really try and make mistakes. Because that's why I try and tell a lot of my athletes is if you're not making mistakes, then why am I here? Like you're wasting your time because it's a training session. It's a time to make mistakes. We're not in a game. It's definitely not a championship game. Like this is where you push, you make those mistakes. And I feel like it's kind of a mindset sometimes to just be like, okay, I want it to look good. I just want to go at a speed that I do it right. And even thinking about shooting, right? Because you talked about a few weeks ago, we talked about, when you start really pressing and going game time speed for your shots in your training sessions, it takes 2 or 3 weeks. So that takes patience and trust in the process that eventually my shot will come around. Because when you start, it feels like you're rushing a shot when you're like really going game speed. So I'm just curious how you almost get athletes to buy into that. And I feel like now, like I just had a session with one of the kids I've been working with for about 6 to 8 months, and his shot is night and day. And so like I'm like happy as a coach because he's one of my first people I started training. Because at first I'm like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? You want those results fast, but it's about patience.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I think there's a couple different ways to go about it. I know how I do it and try to get players to buy in, but I think a lot of it has to do with having different anecdotes, and I think even just using myself as an example. And so a lot of times players might look at me when they're going through and talk about shooting quick, but it can be hard sometimes to build credibility. So I spent a lot of time as a shooter, and I don't always do a great job at the sessions. I try to warm up a little bit or warm up my shot just a little bit in the morning time before going. And I know after I get, just about 5 reps, I'll be to kind of find my own zone. But something that I use is then I go and I show them how it should look. And for them, they're not really looking at how I do it. They're just going to watch whether or not I make the shot. But if I am able to make a few of the shots and they see, I'm like, oh, okay, like he knows how to shoot the basketball. Like he can shoot it. A couple weeks ago, I was in Lubbock, Texas, and I went through and I did the shooting activity. And this was later on in the session, but I did the shooting activity that they had been doing and did it from the 3-point line and kind of blew out the scores that they had done. And it's like, oh, wow, like, okay, he actually understands what it is. And not only is he just telling us, but, oh, this might be helpful. And, oh, he is actually like a much shorter guy. So if he's a shorter guy and he played and was able to be a 1,000-point scorer at the college level and the high school level, man, for me as a taller person, if I implement this in my game, I could really go and take it to another level. And that's why I try to tell them, like, all of you are capable of playing at a higher level than me if you're willing to put in the same amount of time and effort. And throughout the course of a shooting college weekend, or if I'm working with a player individually, I talk to them about specific things that I did to get to where I got to in my own playing career. And not that I don't even believe that I maximized my playing career. I think there's a lot of things that I would have done different. And if I had to go back and do it again, and things I would change. And that's also me sharing like, hey, these are things I would change, and I was still able to do this and that. And so for you, if you're able to kind of almost get a jump start from where I was, then it can really benefit. But I think to, answer that question is I really just try to show them by me going out and shooting, if that's it, or ball handling, and try to build a little bit of credibility, and then really just make sure that they're not focused on the outcome and really just focus on, hey, like if you want the outcome to be this, these are the steps you're going to have to take first and focus on.
Right. Here's the process to get to the outcomes the consistent outcomes that you want. Because anyone can, kind of get lucky and make 6 out of 10 shots one time. But can you make 6 out of 10 shots consistently? And I think I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. And I know you're talking about role modeling, and I want to talk a little bit about health and nutrition, something you're really passionate about, because I feel like it's something that We innately know and coaches know, but I feel like even I know personally that sometimes I skip over it when I talk to my athletes. So, when you're working with athletes, what are some of the things you talk about with health and nutrition for them?
Yeah, so even just to give a little background, because I'm not a certified health and nutrition specialist. I have my undergrad degree in education. I have a
Right.
master's in business leadership, and so I really don't have any formal education. But just over 3 years ago, I started working at a college, and the head coach of that school at Madonna University, he had someone in his family kind of get sick, and it kind of led him down a path over like a 10-year path of figuring out health and nutrition for himself. And by the time I got there, he had been about 4 years really deep into his own journey and how it transformed his body and the way that he felt, and throughout the course of a day. And so we shared an office, and so we started to have some conversations. And during my senior year of college, I'd read a book called Natural Born Heroes by Christopher McDougall, same author that wrote a more popular book, Born to Run. And in that book, he referenced just like a diet that I'd never heard of before, and now it's a lot more common. But back in 2016, more of like a ketogenic diet is kind of what he was talking about. And yeah, the boss and the head coach that I worked under, he wasn't a proponent of the ketogenic diet, but he did things a little bit differently. And I saw the way he ate, and it was a little bit different. And so I was curious, and I started asking questions, and he had started giving me some different podcasts to listen to and some different books to read. And I started to do it. And man, what I noticed is I just loved the podcasts I was listening to. I love the speakers. And then, similar to what I imagine what other people do is you hear one speaker on a podcast and you really enjoy them. So then you go find their podcast and you start listening to them and you hear someone on their podcast. And so now I have 5 different health and nutrition podcasts that I'm listening to with all different views, but generally a same foundation and framework. And yeah, so for the past 3 years, I've just spent a lot of time in an informal education way of just figuring out what it is that health and nutrition is for myself. And then also just kind of understanding like, all right, well, how does this work in the framework of really any human and any person? And so as I was getting prepared to speak with you today, the way that I kind of view health and nutrition is not even just what you're eating, but I kind of look at it at 3 main things when it comes to health and nutrition. And so yes, one aspect is like the actual food that you're putting in your body. But the second one, which I think for athletes at any level, whether it's middle school, especially middle school, as you start to get more autonomy over what you're eating, and high school starting to get more and more autonomy, and then in college, it's pretty much up to you what it is that you're choosing to eat. Maybe a little bit of restriction just because of eating in a cafeteria still, or maybe you're living off campus. But then obviously once you're out of college and you're living on your own, it's fully up to you what it is that you're eating. And so what it is that you're eating, but then also sleep, I think is huge and something that gets overlooked, and something that I overlooked definitely as a high school athlete, and even at times as a college athlete. So the food you eat, your sleep, and then also something that maybe isn't as much of an issue for basketball players, but then it's just fitness and exercise. And, that's more so for people who aren't currently playing a sport. And, for myself who I'm done playing competitive sports. But those are really the three main things when I think of health and nutrition that I focus on.
Okay. I'd love to break them down one by one. And I'd love to, for you to share, like, what are some of the biggest things that you've learned around, food and nutrition in the past few years?
Yeah. So for me personally, when it comes to food, when I was in high school, I just thought as long as I worked out, it didn't really matter what I ate because, oh, look, I'm in good fitness. I'm in good shape. I look like I'm healthy. And so I thought your look was what you were. So if you look healthy, then you are healthy. If you're skinny, you're healthy. And I think that's a huge misconception just in the health space. And so there's actually someone, her name is Kate Shanahan, and she's worked with different NBA teams, different NBA players. And she talks about how even at some of and she doesn't give them by name, she doesn't call them out, but she talks about how there's even NBA players that she works with because they do all the blood work and all the different health studies to go and check them out. And she talks about how there's players that look extremely fit but are not healthy because of the foods that they're eating. And it doesn't show on the outside, and maybe it eventually will, but you could see it on the inside. And specifically what what she means by the inside is the inflammation you have on the inside of your body. And so just like with anything, inflammation, I don't think inflammation is a bad thing because it's part of the healing process. But an over amount of inflammation is just going to put too much stress on the body. And so the foods that you eat are just adding increased inflammation inside your body, which then can also cause an increased risk of injury. And so the way that I think about, all right, what types of foods should someone be eating is, I think if you just start with, and I don't expect someone who doesn't do this to do it right away, but taking small steps to get there, but really just having 80 to 90% of your diet being whole foods. And I think that's a great place to start. And, if you're just starting out and you don't eat a lot of whole foods, if you go through and you look at breakfast and you're eating, maybe you start the day with some cereal and some milk because, as kids, that's what we were told was like a healthy breakfast. Eat Honey Nut Cheerios, right? But really there's no nutritional value in eating a cereal as a breakfast. Maybe if you're using whole milk, but even we started using skim milk, which is devoid of a lot of the nutrients than you would in like whole milk. And so, if you're starting the day eating, cereal, and then, you have that, and then maybe at lunchtime, maybe you have like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then, maybe you have, some pretzels with that, or, hey, maybe a juice box, right? Because juice and fruit, and that's something healthy. And then, you get to dinner time, and you're going and you're eating, like a pasta, and you got, the sauce on all that kind of stuff. Well, you've almost gone your entire day without having any real foods. And so I think just being conscious and being aware of that. And so if you go through an entire day and that's all that you ate, you consumed quite a few calories. And so your body's going to have the energy to do so, but it's not going to have the nutrients that it's going to need to perform at its highest level. And so I think just being aware of that and conscious and starting to gear towards eating more whole foods would be a good direction to start in. I'm not sure if that is a good starting point for you. But yeah, no, I think just starting by eating whole foods.
Yeah, whole foods is a good starting point. And I want to almost go back to your earlier point where you're talking about how, we're talking about, again, outcomes in process. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions around, especially like, social media, like, oh, this dude's ripped, has a six pack, but could eat chips. And, like a lot of times it's just genetics, especially in the NBA. And then I didn't know that, I'd heard of it a little bit, but I think it's a good reminder that like, certain processed foods, probably foods that are higher in sugar, and, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like those contribute to higher inflammation. Higher inflammation is a higher chance of injury. And to me, like I'm actually going through the PGC leadership and like self-leadership right now, and just like making sure that as a coach, I want to role model what being healthy looks like. Means like I have to make healthy choices even when the kids aren't around, because those healthy choices help me show up, and be more effective as a coach and as a leader and as a mentor. And I think that's really important around that. Can you share like, what are some examples that you try and incorporate into your diet for like whole food wise?
Yeah, for sure. So my own personal health views, there's so many different diets out there. There's vegan, there's vegetarian, there's keto, right. There's Mediterranean keto, there's high carb, there's low carb. And so there's a lot of different diets, and my views have definitely altered and changed towards what type of diet I veer to and what I think is most healthy. But whatever diet I've been doing, whole foods has always been the base. And so to be honest with you, I kind of early on, I kind of veered towards like a really like close to a ketogenic diet, but even higher in the protein end. Is kind of what I thought was like the healthiest diet. And I do think that each diet, like there's a framework for where each diet should be used. But so I currently, the way that I view it is I still think the one thing that should be the highest based on just what I've been listening to, and this goes into, there's about 3 different podcasts that I listen to, and I'll even share them with, maybe your listeners if they want to go and listen to them. But the 3 main podcasts I listen to, and all great guys and all great resources, go on your own, because I'm just at a very high level, just kind of sharing my own beliefs, and not even that my beliefs, again, I don't have the formal education. It's just been learning from those who do have their formal education. But Max Lugavere for the Genius Life podcast, he doesn't do only health and nutrition, does some other things as well, but has some really good really good guests that come on to his podcast. Sean Stevenson, I think, might be the most popular health nutrition podcast, and he does the Model Health Show. And then one that's not as popular, but I think he does some really good stuff and provides really good framework is Brian Sanders. He does Peak Human podcast, and those are the three staples that I listen to regularly. I'll listen to each of their podcasts, their new ones. I'll listen to each episode every week, and so it'll be about anywhere between 4 to 6 hours of health and nutrition stuff that I'll be getting from them. So, and yeah, from that lens, the way that I've kind of been doing it is if I just take you through what I would eat in general on a day is I have been incorporating intermittent fasting, and I think there's some benefits for that to just allow your gut time to heal. Just like when you train a muscle really hard, you want that muscle. You don't want to necessarily go and train that muscle the next day because you want to provide time to heal. Same thing with our gut. If our gut is always being used and it never has time to heal itself and rest and recover. And so I use intermittent fasting not as much of like to lose weight or anything like that, but to allow my gut to heal so that it can work at its peak performance as well. So I'll use intermittent fasting, and so usually I try to finish eating by usually about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, to have about 3 hours where I'm not eating before sleep. And then depending on how busy my day is, I'll possibly not eat until noon sometimes. And I don't try to, go and how long can I go? I think, that could be like a harmful mindset, but it's kind of more just when do I have time to eat in the morning? So it'll usually be about anywhere between like 14 to 16 hours that I'll wait to eat. And when I do break that smaller intermittent fast, I think it's really important to do it with protein, like a whole foods protein. So generally I'll do that with some type of eggs, and maybe I'll cut up some onions and put those in there. Maybe even, sometimes I'll add a little bit of dairy, and maybe that's a little bit of like goat cheese, or maybe even I've done a little bit of Greek yogurt. And so that's generally what the first meal of the day looks like. And generally I'll go and just have 2 meals a day, and I feel completely fine and able to work and function that way. And it's usually 2 larger meals. And so even if I do have the eggs, maybe I'll do a little bit of vegetable, maybe put some spinach in there. But usually, to be honest with you, it's quite a few amount of eggs that I'll be eating at one time. So it could be anywhere up to like 5 to 6 eggs, and that'll be like my main meal to start out. And then usually I'll be fine until dinner time. And so around 6 or 7, I usually try to have my dinner. And again, that'll be something with more of a protein base, and then I'll add in some vegetables. And generally, what I like to try to do is there's some different guys out there who do a good job going into explaining it. Dave Asprey, he's written a couple different books. He has a podcast where he talks about being what's called metabolically flexible. And so there's 2 forms of energy that our body can use. It can use glucose or carbs or sugars. So that's one form of energy, the carbs and the sugars, and then also your fats, and that's expressed as ketones. So you can either use glucose or ketones as a form of energy. And being in a position where with how you eat, your body's able to use both. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of early on in the week, I say deprive, but I'll just not have a lot of glucose. And so that my body is starting to get into a fat burning stage. And then later on in the week, because on the weekend, again, just kind of with traveling a lot, don't have as much control over exactly what I eat. Where traveling with PGC, I was in Nebraska this past weekend. So a lot of times it's like, all right, what's the healthiest option and what's the best option I can choose here in this airport? All right, there's a Qdoba, they got some whole food options. And so generally don't always eat the best on the weekends. And so I want to get my body back into a state where it's using both forms of energy. And so, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I might not have as much glucose. And then later on in the week, I'll start to add in maybe some like healthier carbs where I might have some white rice or some sweet potato for dinner time. And yeah, so, that's generally what my meal will look like. And, if I end up having a third meal, it'll look similar to like a dinner time meal, maybe just a little bit smaller, maybe get another protein, a vegetable, maybe add in some rice or maybe some sweet potatoes in there. But yeah, those are, and to be honest with you, I feel like I'm a little bit lucky because not everyone is okay to eat the same foods every single day, but I'm someone who I can eat the same foods every single day and really enjoy it. And so I'm lucky that way where I don't have to be super creative with my meals, but I do think there's a way to do it even for those people who want to be a little bit more creative. But yeah, that's just kind of a more of a general view of how I try to think about my own nutrition myself.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I think that's you provided some interesting resources, especially for those that are listening that kind of want to go down the route of, okay, how can I add, what can I learn more about? And I think you provide that there are going to be different frameworks that work for different people, right? Some people may eat vegetarian and some people may be vegan, paleo, or, keto. So just understanding ourselves, I feel like, is the first place, but, those resources are great. And so transitioning into the second kind of topic that you're kind of focusing on, I think sleep's something that for whatever reasons kind of always came natural to me. Like I've always been a 7 to 8 hour sleeper, and I do not function if I get like less than 7 hours for a consecutive amount of days. So I think, for those, I know that for me, like I have a sleep routine, and like it's something that comes a little bit more natural. But for someone, you talked about how in high school maybe you didn't get as much sleep. So I'm curious, how you approach that with athletes as well, who maybe just like go all the time.
Yeah. So really interesting study that I heard in one of the podcasts I was listening to. This is about a year and a half to 2 years ago that I heard this, and it's stuck with me ever since I did hear it. But there was a study that was happening, and it took a group of people, and I wish I remembered the exact group that it was, but a group of about 20 people. And what they did is they gave them, at the end of each amount of time, they gave them a generic IQ test. And the IQ test that they took, it was two different ones, but again, similar. And they were essentially grading them at the end of a certain amount of time and seeing how they did. So the two groups, the two different times that they tested them, the group, the first time they took the test was they kept them awake for 48 hours straight. So the group was not able to sleep for 48 hours. At the end of 48 hours, they had them take the IQ test. The second time they had them, so I'd imagine that they had them, go back, get rested, come back a couple months later. The second time that they took them, the group was allowed to sleep anywhere between 5 to 6 hours, no more, no less, 5 to 6 hours of sleep every single night for 2 weeks. So for 14 days, they slept 5 to 6 hours a night. And then they gave them, again, another similar IQ test. It wasn't any more difficult, not easier, not harder, the IQ test than the first one that they took. The interesting thing is, and what I would have thought, I'd be like, oh, they must have for sure done better on the 5 to 6 hours over 2 weeks. But overall, the group performed just about 60% better when they had to stay up for 48 hours straight. And here's what I think is the most interesting thing about it. They asked the groups, or the group, which one, before they gave them the results, which one do you think you did better on? And over 90% of the people that participated said that they thought they did better when they got 5 to 6 hours a night, but majority of them did better when they had to stay up for 48 hours straight. And so the reason I share that, and I think it's important, is because a lot of people say, oh, I'm completely good staying up or only getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep, and I can function at a normal level. Well, the group also thought that they performed better on a test with 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night, and ended up doing worse than if they wouldn't have slept in 48 hours. And so as people, it's understanding, and he did give the framework. He said that he does believe that there's a very small percentage, about 5% of the population, that could function on 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. But majority of us do not. And how this pertains to athletes, and why I share this with athletes, is because if you're just getting 5 to 6 hours a night, you may think you're performing at your peak performance and that your brain is functioning because, again, especially basketball is a game of a lot of thinking, a lot of thought. And you may think that your brain's functioning at its highest level, but if you're not getting sleep, your brain is not performing at the highest level, and you are not performing at your highest level if you're not focusing on your sleep. And so really focusing on, I think it depends on the person. And the more you dive into your own health and nutrition, the more you'll understand it. But really 7 to 9 hours of sleep is where you fall. And even the highest, I think the highest level of athletes are starting to understand this, where I saw a stat that, LeBron James in season, he's working to prioritize. And again, maybe it's not 10 hours all in a row, but he's prioritizing about 10 hours of sleep every single day so that his body can recover. And the more that you're doing, probably the more you're going to need to recover.
Right, exactly. And I think, jump into the next point before we get there is when you are an athlete, your body needs more time. I feel like your body needs more time to sleep than probably the average person because your muscles are being used, more, your lungs, everything, and just to be sharper, to be a higher performer. And I think that's in a kind of an interesting way to put it and an interesting way to frame it to athletes is because a lot of times, athletes want to be at their best, right? And they think they're at their best just because that's what they've been doing. But they don't know that if they slept 1 to 2 more hours a night, they might shoot 10% better, which actually is really, it's a huge difference, right? And so when you're talking about wanting to make the next level, whether it's college basketball or you want to jump and you want to be a high school varsity player, right? Like those 1%, 1 to 10% differences can be the world of the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wish I had. There was an article that I'd read back, and this was a little bit while, and I don't have the exact numbers. I don't remember this one as vividly as I did the last anecdote, but no, there's actual studies that have gone out for sports players to show the percentages that they shoot better when they're getting adequate sleep. And so there are studies out there for players who maybe need a little more evidence, but yeah, not getting the right amount of sleep will definitely affect, I think, the percentage that you shoot in games.
That makes a lot of sense. And so with the last one, especially, you know, as coaches, probably a lot of coaches are parents that are listening to this, and they probably are some sort of, you know, they have a full-time job and coaching is like the fun thing that they do, or, you know, they're out of school, they're in administration. And so a lot of times I think, you know, exercising and fitness gets kind of put on the back burner, but I'd love for you to share, you know, a little bit about, you know, for me right now, I have a good amount of free time, so I don't have to, you know, kind of fight against, you know, time. Like I'm really lucky that I have the time in my day to prioritize. But for those that are super busy, like how do you, you know, what thoughts do you have around prioritizing exercise and fitting that in?
Yeah, my high school coach was huge at making sure that he got in his exercise every single day, and he's a little more on the nuts end where, you know, he was waking up at 4:30 every morning. I'm not quite there yet, you know, but he did teach me that, and it did give an example that it's important to prioritize your own fitness and your health, because if you're not in good fitness, then generally you just don't feel as good. But by staying in a good exercise routine, I don't know about you, and I imagine most people we end up feeling better when we exercise. We just feel better, not just about ourselves, but the endorphins of going through a rigorous routine, or it doesn't even have to be that rigorous, but just getting our blood flowing is going to help us to perform better, because not just how we feel, but the actual science behind it. And so, yeah, even, you know, when I coached at the high school level, when I was an athletic director, or when I was coaching in college, there was days where, yeah, I'd like to get my workout in and to try to prioritize it. You know, I'd wake up, you know, 5 or maybe even sometimes before, like my coach, and make sure that was a priority for me. And the way that I think about it is, if we're not feeling at our best as coaches, then we're not going to be able to provide the best for our players. And so it's really making sure, like, we're in a space where we feel like we're healthy and we have energy, so that we can then pay forward that energy to the players that are paying for us. But yeah, I think it just with coaches, and I was fortunate when I was coaching at the college level to have a coach who did prioritize his own health. And so, you know, I wasn't staying up until, you know, 2 a.m. and then having to be back in the office by 7 a.m. and only getting 4 hours of sleep and not having any time during the day to go and do fitness myself. And I think it can be tough for some people, but, you know, just finding opportunities to, you know, to just do something. But, you know, maybe, you know, you're in the office, and, you know, even something that I'll start to do is, you know, I got like a little pull-up bar that I have, and I'll go, all right, do a couple pull-ups and maybe do a couple push-ups and maybe do a quick exercise. And it's like, man, even just by doing that, I feel so much better. And so just finding ways that you can get it done. It doesn't have to be a lot. I think we think of when we work out, it has to be for an hour at a time. And, if I miss a day, then it's not even worth it now. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of studies that show, and another great resource as it pertains to fitness and exercise is a guy named Sal DiStefano, and he wrote the book called The Resistance Training Movement, and he talks about that in there. You don't need a whole lot of time. If you just spent 60 minutes for an entire week, that would be adequate to create a healthy lifestyle. So I think, you know, coaches, I do think it's really important for us to prioritize our own health in the form of exercise and fitness.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I know that personally on the days that, you know, because I do give myself off days, but on my off days, I just have less energy. Like, that's just kind of how it is. And, you know, there are certain cardio versus like weight training that I do feel like makes you feel better. And then also to that point, one thing, again, that I've been thinking about since that PGC is that, like, a 30 to 40 minute intense, like, focused workout I actually feel better than like an hour at like 60 to 70%. And so maybe that's, that's personal. I don't have injuries to work around, but like, in terms of time, like just for those that are listening, we started recording here at 2:00. I got out of a meeting at 12. So I was like, okay, I got to go and be efficient, pump out a 30 to 40-minute workout. And I do try and get in like my stretching and mobility in as well. So just trying to make sure that we're efficient with our time, and that, that it doesn't always have to be an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. Right. And that's kind of interesting that 60 minutes during the week is sufficient enough. So I think that's all really good advice for, the coaches and the parents that are listening to this podcast. And as we kind of wrap up our conversation today, I would love to have you kind of just share anything about a little bit more on your journey from going from high school to college, and just really helping, talking about that 1 to 10%. Because when we're bridging impact, I know that, this like work ethic has been something that's really been important to my life. And it sounds like it's been something that's really helped you be successful.
Yeah. And so more so in pertaining to athletes and getting them from the high school to the college level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I share this at any PGC session that I work at, because it'll be a large group of athletes. And I talk to them about how it doesn't need to be just because you're here at an intense basketball clinic or intense basketball camp for a week. It doesn't need to be your goal to play college basketball. And, I talk to them about how, maybe at the end of this weekend or maybe at the end of the week, you realize that basketball isn't your passion. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. And I think the reason I love PGC basketball and what I do for them is because it goes beyond the game of basketball, and there's different intangibles that we talk about that will help you become a better basketball player if you incorporate them. But really, it just makes you a better person in life after basketball if you're able to kind of take those on. And so, I talk to players, first of all, it's just like, you are no more or no less of a person if you play basketball at the college level. But I do think what is important is getting players to understand, and whatever it is that you're passionate about, whether that is basketball, or maybe you're really passionate about playing the guitar, or playing the piano, or soccer, or maybe you're just super passionate reader, whatever it is, if you are passionate about it, you should be willing to put the time into it. And so for those players who say, hey, I am passionate about basketball and I do want to play at the college level, then there is going to be an expectation that you are going to be putting the time in, not just when you work with me, whether I'm helping you out individually, or not just when you're with your teams, but there's going to be time and sacrifice on your own. And I know, Coach, something that you had mentioned that I think is important is getting in a regular routine. So we talked about it with fitness and exercise, but when it comes to their own skill development, is getting in a regular routine. And so maybe a player doesn't train at all, and maybe they're like me in middle school and just figuring out where to start. Maybe you don't train at all. Well, go and train 3 days a week for an amount of time that is going to be feasible for you. If you go and try to in the first week and say, I'm going to work out every single day for 3 hours, that's going to be very overwhelming for a lot of players. And then you're going to end up probably not doing, you might do it 1 or 2 days and then be like, yeah, I can't do that. Start where you're at. I know James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, he just says, just start to make a small change and create that as a habit, and then start to stack those habits. But yeah, just start small, wherever that might be, but be willing to get a little bit better. Like, okay, hey, I did this for 2 weeks straight. All right, I think it's time for me to maybe jump it up just a little bit, maybe do 1 more day, or maybe do 10 extra minutes, and get to a point where, for me, by the time I was playing in college, I would, for the summer job that I had, I would go and do my shooting at the gym I was able to get into because it wasn't going to be crowded in the morning. So I'd get there, around 5:30 a.m. and I would shoot before I had to go into work around 8. And so then I'd go and I'd work from 8 to 3. And so I'd have about an hour and a half in the morning of shooting. And then at the end of the day, I would go and find an outdoor basketball court, I'd find a basketball that was pretty worn down because it was a little bit harder to handle. If it was harder to handle, I figured it probably helped my handling out when I did have a ball with a nice grip in an indoor court. So I'd go and do my outdoor ball handling, and then some days I might do some running, some days I might do my lifting, some days I might just do some plyometric work. But it was all planned out. I knew what day I was doing what. And even as I think back, generally it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday is when I would do my lifts. And then Tuesday and Thursday I'd do my run with a little bit of plyo stuff. And ball handling and shooting were 2 things that I did every single day. And then I also knew exactly which days I was going to be playing. On Wednesday nights I played pickup. On Sunday nights I played pickup. And I knew which day I wasn't going to do anything. So on Saturday, I didn't do anything. And I knew that. And I was fine with that. And that was part of the plan. It's not like I woke up and be like, I really feel like doing it today, so I'm not going to do it. It was predetermined and planned when my days were going to be off. And so really and there were days I missed. Like there were days where I was like, I should have got my workout in today, and I didn't. But not letting that one bad day turning into a second bad day, and not letting it snowball into a negative process. And yeah, so for players who want to play at the next level, that's what I talk to them about is, if you're passionate about basketball and you say you want to play at the next level, you've got to be willing to put the time in on your own. I don't know any players who are even, my size and my athleticism that didn't put in a whole bunch of time in their basketball game to play at the college level. There's always going to be exceptions. There's freak athletes. And, what I say to those athletes is like, sure, like maybe you made to play at the college level, but imagine where you could have gone if you would have invested this time in your career. And so it's really just about what you want. Like, sure, I'd imagine LeBron James, he's a freak when it comes to, in a positive way, when it comes to his own work. But if he wasn't a freak, he probably wouldn't be argued as one of the greatest of all time. Maybe he wouldn't have made it to the NBA. Maybe he just would have been a very average or below average NBA player in and out in a couple of years. But because he's so intentional and works so hard, that's what he was able to achieve. And so it's really just about, when I talk to players, what is it that you hope to achieve? And again, just being in basketball for a little bit of time and, my own career, I have an understanding of like, okay, if this is where you want to get to, this is probably what you're going to have to do. And just helping and providing that framework for them and trying to help them along in that journey.
I love that. I think there's so much wisdom into that because number one is your choice. If you're passionate about it, it's up to you whether you want to put the hours into the craft. And then to what you're talking about at the beginning, if you're working with younger high school athletes like myself who are just kind of, getting into things and just figuring out how to train, just have them train, for 20 minutes for 3 days a week. Then, you can go to 30 minutes and an hour. And, at the same time, as I hear you sharing all this, it makes me miss, training and being an athlete and like really going for it. Cause I was doing all the plyometric, the ball handling, my shooting workouts, my lifting, my conditioning. And, sometimes I wish I could turn back the clock, but that's what I share to athletes all the time is like, when they really get frustrated is like, I wish I could be in your shoes. I wish I was 7 years younger and still like, competing and going at it. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I really appreciate your time today. Where can people, or do you have any other resources you'd like to share? And where can people find and connect with you if they really liked you, resonated with your message?
Yeah. So, I have like a personal Instagram. I'm not a huge poster, but they named Dan. So D Decker 11 on Instagram. They go and follow. I don't post a whole lot. It's more, I'm trying to a little bit more just because I know that I do have players from PGC that follow me. And so any content I put out there, I try to make sure it's helping them in a positive way, or at least they see how I interact with my family and how I post about my family, or, just some different things that have been helpful for me. And then on Twitter as well, my Twitter is Dan and then an underscore and then Decker 11. So 11 was my high school basketball number, so that's why it's referenced in both my Instagram and my Twitter. But yeah, even on both, I've never been huge posting on either side, but I do understand that the more I work with PGC, the more I have athletes across the country follow me, and so I do try to provide good content for them in that. But that's where people can find me if they're interested in following what it is that I'm doing. I know even just in general I'm not sure if I fully closed this thought, but since I have changed my health routine and my sleep and what I eat and my exercise routine, I've noticed a significant difference. And just like we were talking about before, like imagine if, one of those big ifs was imagine if I knew this about health and nutrition, because the way I feel now is completely different than the way I felt back when I was a high school player and a college player. And I'm able to do things physically now that I was not able to do then, because I think I've reduced the inflammation in my body by the way that I eat and sleep and exercise. And I'm able to do things like, I was really fortunate where in the past year I've been able to run 3 marathons just on my own and be able to function completely fine throughout a work day while doing it. And no one would have any idea. I didn't, most of the time I don't necessarily post on social media about it. Every once in a while I do, but I might go into school the next day and what'd you do yesterday? And they have no idea, but I don't even tell them, but I went and ran a marathon. But it's because I've been able to transform my body and the way that I feel. And I think athletes, if you are able to start to do that at the high school level and at the college level, it can drastically change how you perform and reduce your risk of injury. So I did want to just make sure I close that thought from a personal anecdote for how I feel and how it can change the way that athletes feel.
That's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for your time today, Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Coach.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.